got a question for you. Have you ever been on a lad's holiday? Or maybe a hen do or a bachelor party? If you have, then you'll know they tend to be chaotic and perhaps just a little bit naughty. For Crew, situations like that are not an occasional indulgence. They're practically routine. Yeah, we will admit it. Sometimes we behave in ways that are only really considered normal in the kinds of groups I just mentioned. Put a bunch of us in a metal tube long enough to bond, load us onto a bus with a crystal geyser bottle discreetly refilled with punch, and then release us into a hotel where the bar offers a free welcome drink, followed immediately by happy hour, and Crew have been known, to put it mildly, to let their hair down. In fact, I have often thought we would make a perfect case study for anyone writing a dissertation on how humans socialise when given a set of parameters quite as unique as ours. But anyway, I'll try not to waffle. The point is, sometimes we get carried away. And recently, a few Crew have been in touch to share some stories that made us laugh out loud and immediately want to fly with them. They have owned up to their roles in these shenanigans and quite sensibly requested anonymity, because in most cases, they are still very much denying any involvement to their airline's management. So, grab your cup of tea, or your wine, or your red-eye travel mug if you're driving, and settle in for this week's story, which comes with a good old dose of Crew behaving badly.
Doors to armed and cross-check.
Come fly, the red eye!
Welcome aboard the Red Eye.
Miami, 2017. This Crew. Imi smiled into her plastic cup as she sipped the Prosecco the manager had just poured her. This is what she'd signed up for. This was the life that she had envisioned when she filled out the job application just over a year ago. So far, she'd had a great time. Been to some amazing places, but never had she felt like she was on holiday with her best friends like she did right now. The only downside was that it was just a one-night layover in a hotel miles from anywhere. Still, you couldn't have it all. And so far, everyone was up for pre-drinks and happy hour at the hotel bar, followed by a room party after. But first, they had this. The bus driver turned up the music, and she could see him checking them all out in the rearview mirror, a grin spread across his face. The bus was a party bus, a stand-in for the normal Crew transfer that was out of service. A long black beast with tinted windows and a pole in the middle. The kind of thing you usually saw in Vegas. And today, with no one looking in, it was the venue for a group of Crew in loosened uniforms releasing some post-flight energy before they reached the hotel. Josh whooped as he swung around the pole, and Kai swaggered up from the back to join him, sliding up and down, dropping to the floor in effortless squats that made Imi's glutes hurt just to watch. The bus took a bend, and a collective cheer went up as drinks sloshed out of cups, and she brushed droplets from her skirt before they soaked through. Behind them was the airport and a transatlantic crossing. In front of them, the highway and a hotel bar. When they were nearly there, they circled the block twice more before finally pulling up at the hotel. The captain, his hat perched somewhat lopsided on his head, tipped the driver as he helped them all down the steps, the girls wobbly on their heels. Suppressing their excitement, they straightened ties, buttoned up blouses, and disposed of empty bottles and cans in the bin by the driver's seat. Then, one by one, they stepped back into the real world, attempting to look as close as they could to the same Crew which had checked in back in London. The glass hotel doors slid open, and the doorman tipped his head, welcoming them to the hotel. The Crew smiled politely back as they wheeled their cases past him and stepped inside. Straight onto the catwalk. Someone let out a low whistle. Someone else muttered a silent prayer. "What the heck is going on here?" asked John, the captain. Imi shrugged, trying to figure it out herself. Lined up, their backs to the walls of the vast lobby, stood an army of mannequins. All stood motionless, staring straight ahead. There must have been 50, perhaps even 100, all dressed in an array of evening wear. Tuxedos to ball gowns, cocktail dresses and fishtails. They had shiny wigs and painted faces, and a collective frozen stare that immediately clashed with the energy of the group. In the middle of the far wall was a small stage, and from that a long red carpet stretched out. Behind the stage was a sign. Ralph, the first officer, read it slowly. "The Miami Fashion Show." "Well, I'm in," Josh said excitedly, throwing his hand to his hip and promptly catwalking towards the red carpet. "Josh, stop!" Julie called him back. She was the manager, 20 years older than the rest of them, and the one who was supposed to be keeping them in check. Josh spun round and grinned. "Oh, spoil sport," he teased her. "Just not while you're in uniform, please," Julie scolded him playfully. "So I can do it later?" Julie rolled her eyes. She'd seen it all before. Been managing the kids for years. "Look, if you get into trouble later, you work for the other airline, okay?" Josh gave her a salute. "Always." With their keys in hand, the crew made their way to the lift. There was a buzz amongst the youngsters, and that included the first officer. But while the majority piled into one lift, Julie and the captain held back. "I think we should stay clear tonight," said Julie. It was what most of the senior crew did. They stayed away from trouble. No one wanted to spoil the kids' fun. They were all young once after all. But if there was trouble to be found, it was best that they were somewhere else. Otherwise, the company expected them to deal with it. And that was one sure way to ruin their own evening. Worse still, they'd be dragged into disciplinary meetings to give their side of the story and be partly responsible for someone else's demise. No, it was always better to know nothing. John nodded in agreement, an unspoken understanding. Hopefully we won't get a call from security in the middle of the night. You fancy a drink in the restaurant? They won't find us there." "Perfect," Julie smiled. She looked at her watch. It was 4:30 p.m. "On the hour?" The lift doors opened. "On the hour," agreed John. "Room party in mine?" said Immy, hopping down from the bar stool. 12:18. Just give me 5 minutes head start. "You star," said Josh, raising his glass to taste her. He was going to suggest his own room if no one else offered soon. But it was always a relief not to be the host, not to have to deal with the aftermath the next day. After the last room party he'd hosted, where someone had spilt red wine all over the carpet and someone else had blocked his toilet, he was a little reluctant to host again too soon. But at $15 a drink, now that happy hour was over, if he needed to, he would have. But he didn't. So, that was just wonderful. The rest of the group followed Immy up a few minutes later, stopping by in the lobby first to see the mannequins. It was funny how now, with a few more drinks, they seemed so much more personable. Almost having their own personalities, Josh thought, walking slowly along the row that led to the lift, meeting each of them in the eye. On the far side, the show was on, and people sat in neat rows watching the real-life models sashay along the catwalk. They all had their backs to the crew, and the crew all walked on ahead of Josh, leaving him to his moment of connection with the plastic people. No one noticed when he swung his arms so casually around the last mannequin's shoulders. To anyone outside, from the casual way that he spoke in her ear, the gentle touch he placed on her cheek, they might have been just an ordinary couple. Even when he gently lifted her from the floor and started walking her to the lift, she moved in the same rhythm as him, and he kept up his side of the conversation without faltering. By the time Josh placed his new friend outside of room 1218 and knocked on the door, she had a name. Betty. And Betty was primed and prepped to be a fully fledged member of the crew that night. Hi! Oh, what the hell? Josh poked his head around the corner, swallowing down a giggle as he caught the look of shock on Imi's face. Meet Betty, crew member 13, he grinned, picking her up and walking past Imi into the room. Imi stuck her head out and looked nervously up and down the corridor. "Oh my God, Josh, you're crazy," she said, closing the door quickly behind them. 2 hours later. I absolutely refuse to take calls on my days off anymore. It's never worth the headache and never appreciated, Julie repeated. They were both on the same page, her and John. Both been around long enough to see the managers change and each one of them come in thinking they were going to rewrite the script. And they both knew how to play things by now. They played by the rules. They wrote everything up, stayed out of room parties, and towed the line just enough to fill their contracts. But when it came to giving more than they had to, that boat had long sailed. "Here's to that," John seconded, raising his glass and signalling to the waiter for a refill. "I have to say, Julie, I'm having a surprisingly pleasant evening," he said. Julie let out a small laugh. "I'm not sure how to take that, John." "Oh, sorry, no, I mean, he stammered, and then smiled when he saw she was doing the same. "This trip pattern isn't usually one of my favourites, but this is actually really pleasant." He led her eyes outside to confirm what he meant. They were sat in the window of the hotel restaurant on the first floor. Just outside, palm trees swayed lightly in the breeze, and the lights were just beginning to switch on as the sun set on the horizon. Beneath them, the lights reflected in the water of the swimming pool, which glowed bright blue. People still gathered around it, finishing their drinks on the lounges. There was Latino music playing from somewhere, and the sound of laughter and conversation was in the air. It was still early in Miami. No doubt in an hour or two those same people would be ordering taxis and heading out to the lights of Ocean Drive, or hitting up the clubs for which the city was famous. Perhaps the young crew would be doing the same. "How do you think the kids are getting on?" Julie asked. John gave a lopsided smile. "Oh, well, probably having an early night, behaving themselves." Julie laughed, twirling her glass in her hand before taking a sip. "Oh, to be young and responsibility-free again," she sighed. She looked down at the pool again, trying to remember the last time she went out and got trolleyed. Truly let her hair down. "We had a good time when we were their age, eh?" "Ugh, didn't we just?" Julie laughed. "The things we got up to before camera phones and social media." "Yeah, I actually feel a bit sorry for them. They can't get away with half the stuff we used to." The sound didn't seem to belong in the scene, and it took the pair of them a second to register it before a flash of something blue and orange plummeted straight past their window and plunged into the pool. Julie's heart thudded against her chest as she jumped up, pressing her forehead against the window to see what the hell had just happened. Either side of her, other diners rushed to do the same. "Is that—" John's voice tailed off. Julie turned, and they locked eyes in horror. Down below them, face down in the pool, was a body. A body that appeared to be wearing their company uniform. A body that appeared to be lifeless. Before they could see what happened next, the pair of them dashed from the restaurant and down the stairs, running as fast as they could outside. Not stopping to assess the situation, without a thought for himself or his attire, John kicked off his shoes and dove into the pool fully clothed. 2 big strokes and he was with her, flipping her onto her back and pulling her to the edge. She felt cold and rigid, but he couldn't think about that yet. He just had to get her to the side and take things from there. It wasn't until he pushed her up to Julie and caught the look on her face, when he heard the laughter from the people who were watching on, that he looked closely at the victim. Now, from where he stood on the poolside, dripping wet in his clothes, it was obvious that she wasn't a victim at all. No, she wasn't even a person. Captain John had just jumped into the pool fully clothed and saved the life of a mannequin. A life-sized plastic doll who just so happened to be wearing the airline's uniform. Julie and John both raised their eyes upwards, up the rows of balconies above them. As they reached the 12th floor, one door pulled shut with a thud. They all jumped back from the balcony, and someone pulled the French door close behind them. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! You bloody idiot, Josh! What the fuck?" Imi was melting down, going full on into a panic. The room, just a moment ago full of hysterical laughter, had fallen into a deathly silence. "I'm so sorry." All colour had drained from Josh's face. He hadn't meant to drop her. He'd only been messing around. But his moment of theatre, the part where he had bent her over the railings to mimic the scene from the Titanic, had just gone horribly wrong. A minor misjudgment, a loss of grip, of whatever it had been, had happened so quickly, Betty had been over the balcony and out of his hands before he could save her. And even then, he could have just gone down and got her if the story had ended there, but oh no, the captain had appeared, like David Hasselhoff in an episode of Baywatch, and saved her life. And now, now they were in a whole load of trouble. Especially him. Unless he could figure a way out of it. It was the perfect plan, Josh decided, facing the problem head-on before it faced them. It wasn't as if they could just deny all knowledge, after all. Imi would be missing a uniform, and if she was going to go down, then so, by default, was he. No, she needed to be the victim. Because if she was the victim, then how could she also be the perpetrator, right? So, drunk as they were, although sobered up remarkably quickly, he had dragged poor Imi to the security office to act out their roles. "So, you're saying somebody broke into your room and stole your uniform?" The security guard eyed the pair, a look of weary disbelief on his face. To his left sat the hotel manager. He mirrored his expression, his arms folded across his chest, wishing it would just all go away. This was Friday night in Miami. Things happened. People got wasted, people got high, people did dumb things. Compared to some of the things he'd seen, a mannequin abduction and drowning really wasn't cause for a full-blown investigation. Not in his eyes, anyway. Imi kept her own face straight and her eye contact steady. They had gone over it a dozen times in the past 30 minutes. They had practiced their answers, covered any potential curveballs. "Yes," she said, perfectly practiced. "I may have left my door open by accident when I went out, but someone must have gone in and taken my uniform. That's definitely what happened." He looked at Josh. "And Miss Patel has been in your room all evening?" "Yes, sir. We were all in my room. Everyone will tell you the same." "And neither of you know how the mannequin in the pool came to be wearing your uniform, Miss Patel?" The pair shook their heads in perfect unison. "Like we said," Josh answered on her behalf before she could crack under pressure. "It must have been the same person who got into Imogen's room. They must have been playing a joke. I'm sure they meant no harm." He smiled a small, innocent smile, the kind that had always gotten him out of trouble as a child. There was a knock at the door. The guard shook his head and put down his pen, standing up to open it. "Sorry to keep you," John apologised, stepping in, closely followed by Julie. "I just had to get some dry clothes on." They had still been at the pool when word had come of the crew member's uniform being stolen, and the meeting had been called. They joined the others at the conference table, and the two crew told their version of events once again. When they had finished, the hotel manager looked at John. "Sir, would you like us to check CCTV to confirm the events?" Imi felt a surge of heat flush up her entire body. Josh felt a momentary flutter of panic and pushed it back down. Julie looked at John and gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. And John smiled. "No, that'll be fine for us, gentlemen," he said, standing up and pushing his chair backwards. John was happy as long as his own butt was covered. And he could get back to that nice glass of red and the good company he'd been enjoying. If you are satisfied that my crew were not involved, then that is good enough for us. He looked at Julie, who nodded her agreement. If you can just send me your report so that I can get it over to the company in case there's any comeback, I'd be ever so grateful. And, he looked at Imi and Josh. You two, you're okay with that? The pair nodded slowly, but didn't speak. Julie rose too now. Yes, and if poor Imi could just get her uniform cleaned and returned before checkout, that'd be a huge help, she asked sweetly. She was too eager to get back to her wine and the nice evening they'd been having, and to be having a good laugh over all that had happened. The manager raised an eyebrow at her reference to poor Imi. One by one, the others left the room, leaving Imi and Josh in stunned silence behind. They waited a while before speaking, but they didn't need to exchange words to know that they were thinking the exact same thing. Not one person in that room had believed a single word of their story. The next day, the crew filtered down into the lobby, all professional and polished in their uniforms. Josh wheeled his case from the lift and stopped as he reached Betty. Around the room, her fellow mannequins still stared into space, faces and limbs still frozen the same as they had been 24 hours before. But Betty, she was different to the others now. She was practically Crew. In fact, if he didn't know better, he could have sworn she looked different today. More alive than the others. She was back in her original evening gown, which had somehow reappeared outside of the lifts overnight, but he could still remember how well she had worn the uniform the night before. He leaned in and whispered in her ear, "Nice to know you, crew member 13. Are you apologising for trying to drown her?" Josh turned to see Julie walking by. He opened his mouth to reply, but didn't know what to say. Julie gave him a wink and tapped the side of her nose with her finger. "Funniest thing I've seen in a decade," she said. "Oh, me too," John said, as he followed close behind. He was shaking his head as he laughed at the memory. He gave the same knowing tap to the side of his nose. "Close call, though, lad. Very close." "I don't know what you're talking about," Josh called after them, tapping his own nose as they walked away. "Do we, Betty?" Betty, of course, said nothing. But Josh could have sworn she smiled.
The Red Eye podcast is written by Kaylee Kay, narrated and produced by me, Ali Murphy. These stories are based on true events, but certain details, characters, and timelines have been altered to protect the innocent. Visit our website, theredeyepod.com, to subscribe to our newsletter and to find out details on how you can contribute your story for us to turn into an episode. If you enjoyed listening to our stories, please like, subscribe, and review. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Red Eye podcast. You guys are why we do this. We love the stories that you have, and we love telling you the stories that people share with us. To help us reach more people and get the podcast really out there, we would really appreciate it if you left a review. It just helps our podcast be a little bit more visible. Thank you.